one-room schoolhouse that was built in 1880. Downstairs we have a little museum and like a one-room schoolhouse used to be, and upstairs we have the Tom Dooley art exhibit of the drawings and paintings of the Tom Dooley story and artifacts from his period of time. Tom Dooley's always been one of my favorite stories, even when I was a child. My father told me the story over and over again, Mr. Tom Ferguson, and his father was about the same age of Tom Dooley. And of course he knew all about the story and the murder and all the different things that happened. And so the story was handed down from generation to generation, and my father told me the story over and over again. And we had a farm up in Caldwell County, and a lot of times I would ride with my father up to that farm, and we would go on what is called now the Tom Dooley Road. And as we passed by Tom Dooley's grave, my father would say, "Tom Dooley's buried up there." And I'd say, "Oh, tell me the story again." And every time we'd go up that road, I'd have my daddy tell me the story all over again about Tom Dooley. It was one of the most fascinating stories I'd ever heard. And so I always loved to draw and paint, even when I was just a small child. And I always said, when I get older and I can draw well and paint well, I'm going to paint the story of Tom Dooley. And when the Kingston Trio came in and made the song famous, the ballad of Hang Down Your Head, Tom Dooley, I was so excited about it at that time that I said, now I must do it. And I was married with 2 small children at the time, and they would play around on the floor and I would paint. And I would tell the story as I painted, and I would play the record, and my children always said, "Mom, we always learned the song Tom Dooley. We knew it before we knew Jesus Loves Me."
This is a legend from out of the past. As with all legends, there is a blend of both fact and fiction. Not every person telling the story agrees on details such as dates, Army regiment numbers, or even names, but all agree on the essential story, the eternal triangle of a man loved by 2 women.
Hang down your head, Tom Dooley, hang down your head and cry. Hang down your head, Tom Dooley, poor boy, you're bound to die. Took her for my sweetheart, I took her for my wife, I took her round the hillside, there I took her life.
This is the little community of Ferguson, Wilkes County, North Carolina, as it is today. Here, over a century ago, our legend was born. A legend that has found its way from generation to generation, to the Hollywood screen, to the outdoor amphitheater stage, the ballet, and to the top of the music charts. Our cast of characters includes Tom Dooley, pronounced Dooley in his day, was born June 22nd, 1844, the last child of Thomas and Mary Keaton Dooley. He was tall and handsome, with black curly hair and dark flashing eyes. He had a zest for living, and his life was filled with fun and laughter. Laura Foster was the daughter of Wilson Foster and lived on German Hill in Caldwell County. She had chestnut hair and brown eyes, a beautiful girl, but frail. Ann Foster Melton forms the third side of the triangle, the daughter of Carlotta Foster. She was a cousin of Laura and has been described as a most beautiful woman. Ann had once been Tom's sweetheart, but while he was away in the Civil War, she married another. Her jealousy of Tom's attentions to Laura may have been the reason for Laura's brutal murder. Tom was a skilled musician on both the banjo and fiddle. He was always in demand to play for local square dances and other social gatherings. At these dances, Tom often enjoyed the company of young ladies, such as Laura Foster and her cousin, Ann. The gentle way of life in the valley was brought to an end when the South was plunged into the tragic conflict of a civil war. Young men quickly enlisted to defend the South's honor. Tom enlisted in the Confederate Army in March 1862 at Elkville, Wilkes County, North Carolina, when he was 17 years old. He served in the 42nd Regiment, Company K.
I'll hang my harp on a willow tree. I'll off to the wars again. My peaceful home has no charms for me. A battlefield, no pain. The lady I love will soon be a bride with a diadem on her brow. Oh, why did she flatter my boyish pride? She's going to leave me now.
Tom served the South honorably and bravely during the war. He saw action in some of the war's grimmest battles. During the dark days of the war, Tom kept up the morale of his company with his witty remarks and the lively music of his fiddle. In 1865, the ragged, hungry, and homesick soldiers of Company K were taken prisoners of war. At last, the bloody war was over, and Tom was released. He walked up the river road, home from war. He was weary and worn, but he had a smile upon his lips and his fiddle in his hand. Anne had promised to wait for Tom, but she had married James Melton. Tom started seeing a lot of Laura, but he and Anne met secretly. Laura and Tom planned to be married. Early one morning, Laura slipped away riding her horse Belle to meet Tom. This was the last day she was seen alive. It was the discovery of the missing horse which led the village to be concerned for Laura's life.
I met her on the mountain, there I took her life. Met her on the mountain, stabbed her with my knife.
A search began by a party of over 75 men. Weeks later, the horse on which David Horton was riding backed and shied away, refusing to go forward. At this spot, Laura was found buried in a shallow grave. Walt Winkler brings the tragic news to Laura's father.
Will, we found Laura. She's dead.
Tom and several other young men who had been keeping company with Laura left the village. Tom fled to Watauga County, changed his name to Hall, and worked on James Grayson's farm long enough to earn money for a pair of boots. Ben Ferguson and Jack Adkins followed him to Grayson's place, only to find that Tom had fled to Tennessee. With Grayson's help, they captured Tom and brought him back to Wilkes County. Tom, alighting from his horse in front of Cole's store at Elkville, said,
I didn't harm the girl.
I take my banjo this evening, I take it on my knee. This time tomorrow evening will be no use to me. This time tomorrow, reckon where I'll be. Hadn't it been for Grayson, I'd been in Tennessee.
Tom was arrested and placed in the custody of Sheriff William Hicks. He was sent to the Wilkes County Jail and guarded by Deputy Jesse Ferguson. In the meantime, Anne and her cousin and close friend, Pearline Foster, attended a party in the village. When times got high, Anne made a remark that didn't set well with Pearline, and Pearline said,
You'd better hush or I'll tell something.
To which Anne replied,
You are as deep in the mud as I am in the mire.
This simple statement led to the arrest of the two women, and they were placed in the Wilkes County Jail. Later at the trial, Pearline turned state's evidence and told all that she knew about the matter. Because it was not felt that Tom could have a fair trial in Wilkes County, the trial was moved to Statesville in the neighboring county of Iredell. Jim Horton, a relative of Tom, encouraged Tom to tell what he knew.
Tom, why don't you tell the truth about this? What are you hiding?
Jim Horton asked Zebulon Vance, Civil War hero and North Carolina governor, to defend Tom at his trial. Vance failed to prove Tom innocent, and Tom was sentenced to be hanged. Tom's mother, Mary Dooley, a tiny and frail widow, walked from Ferguson to Statesville, a trip of approximately 50 miles once a week to take clean clothes and food to Tom. Tom was her last son, having lost two others in the Civil War. On the morning of the hanging, Tom saw the last sun he would ever behold, shedding its light through the bars of the window. He called for his spiritual advisors and prayed, still denying his guilt or any knowledge of the murder. Later in the morning, he was baptized and spent his last hours in prayer.
I've got to walk that lonesome valley. I've got to walk it by myself. Oh, nobody can walk it for me. I've got to walk it by myself.
Tom maintained his innocence until the very end.
Gentlemen, do you see this hand? Does it tremble? I didn't hurt a hair on the girl's head.
However, on the night before his hanging, he wrote a note gallantly exonerating Ann Melton of any part of the murder.
This time tomorrow, reckon where I'll be, down in some lonesome valley, hanging from a white oak tree.
Tom's body was brought back to his home overlooking the Yadkin River. The lean-to on the left was his room. Here, his body was laid on his old feather bed before he was buried. Tom was laid to rest under the apple tree close to his home. He was only 23 years of age. Ann Melton boasted,
They'll never put a rope around this pretty neck.
She and Pearline were successfully defended by Zebulon Vance and were released. Sometime after, Anne met her death when a pony cart in which she was riding overturned. Dr. George Carter, beloved country doctor, tried vainly to save her life. Before she died, Anne spoke in confidence with Dr. Carter and her husband, but what she told them was never revealed.
I've got to go and stand my trial. I've got to stand it by myself. Oh, nobody can stand it for me. I've got to stand it by myself.
3 lonely graves. On a day when the air is still, and if you have a good imagination, you can hear the ring of Tom's merry laughter and the happy music of his fiddle as it echoes down the valley. 3 lonely graves. But the story of Tom, Laura, and Anne will never be forgotten. What remains today of a legend that happened so long ago? Visible reminders of Tom, Laura, and Ann are few. The graves, remnants of buildings, a lock of hair. The tall hills and deep valley hold the secrets of a legend of a time long past.
My husband's great-grandparents bought the Dooley farm after the Dooleys moved away, and they tore down the house a little bit later after renters had used it. And so they saved a lot of things like doors and windows and door handles and things like that, like people back in those days did, so that they could use them a little bit later. People back in those days could not afford tombstones, and the families were, of course, buried in family cemeteries rather than behind a church or in another community-type cemetery. And the stones that they used, they would just go down to the river and get a great big rock, sort of a flat rock, and they would use that for the headstone. The old rock that was there at the cemetery, the lady who owned the land asked me if I'd like to have that old rock, and I said, oh, I sure would. So this is the original tombstone that Tom had at his grave. The hair of Laura Foster's was found over in Ashe County. The family of Witherspoon, who used to live here in Elkville, were very close friends of the Foster family. And in those days, back in the Civil War days, instead of giving photographs as tokens of friendship to each other, they would give a lock of hair. And this lock of hair is one that Laura Foster gave to this family of Witherspoons.